Steve's got your intro.
Wow, that was trippy. Yeah, that was pretty exciting, actually. I was like not expecting that to be so loud in your face.
You did so good last week. And tonight you weren't quick enough, Steve.
Yeah, usually they tell me I'm too quick. So,
welcome everybody. Yeah, last week he made me so proud. He was so quick whenever I randomly threw it to him. But I'm gotta keep him on his toes. You know about Steve. He had his Saturday night was a little later than usual, I think, and we talked about some subjects that were they were new to me, and I assume, Steve, some of them were new to you as well.
A couple things I had learned that I can't unlearn.
Right, and we'll talk more about that here in just a few minutes. But let's first say hello to definitely the cutest couple on the planet. You will be able to tell that tonight if you're joining us for the first time by the way that they stop and look at each other. Like, yeah. Somebody call Nicholas Sparks. Get him on the phone right now. Dave, can we get Nicholas Sparks?
No. I don't think so. No.
So how have you guys?
Dave says no.
It's been. It feels like it's been months since you've been here.
It has. Well, it's been like 3 weeks maybe, but it's been too long.
Have you been avoiding us? You can tell us. It's okay.
They have their own channel now. They're busy. They're like big shots now. They actually got like, I don't know, 5 million subs or something, or I don't know what it is. I know you broke 500 subs. What are you, 1,000 subs now? Yeah.
Forgot little us.
Putting out that content. The official content creators.
They are. They pump it out too.
Right.
I mean, they pump it out. Like, I know that we go probably. They go all 7. They go 7 days a week.
We try.
They're not messing around.
No.
Megan's a taskmaster.
I keep trying to persuade Josh to take a break, and he won't do it. So
yeah, that's what's happening.
We keep saying the same thing. We're like, we're gonna take a break, and yet we end up streaming something anyways. You know.
Yeah, we decided to take the weekends off, and here for the past 4 weeks we've not taken the both days off, and we just added a flat Earth debate for this Sunday. So I don't get it. The crazy won't stop coming. Nope. It will not stop coming. Anyways,
too much to talk about.
There is. Welcome back, both of you guys. It's good to have you here. We'll run through what we've got coming up for the week really quickly, and then we're going to do something kind of special and different, and then we will get into the Epic of Gilgamesh, very epically, mind you.
yay!
So tomorrow we have everybody's favorite, fan favorite. Everybody loves this guy, Saiten Bruggencate. Actually, well, Steve, how would you categorize Sai's
Sai is well, kind of hard to say. I would say that most people that had experienced presuppositional apologetics before, they kind of they find it interesting, but there was quite a bit of hate that we had Saiten on for some strange reason, and I'm not quite sure why. I mean, we've had flat earthers on, we've had people that think that pissing on legs will cure gangrene, and yet Saiten is getting the most amount of hate. Not quite sure why, but hey, we're having him on again, so deal with it.
Yes, and tomorrow he will be having a conversation with Raul Cardona from Street Knowledge. So we titled this Street Presup. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure, but your guess is as good as mine. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. On Wednesday, Hugo and Jake from the Bible Reloaded will be with us at 8 p.m. also Eastern. And then on Thursday, if you ever thought or were suspicious that Hollywood was hiding some of Satan's most prized transgenders, then you're in luck, because transvestigation will be the subject that we talk to the Armored One, Armored Skeptic, at 8 p.m. Eastern. Can't wait for that. And then on Friday, Parallax Nick Great channel, very informative. He's got a fantastic 2-part presentation. The first part will be this Friday, and then the next part will be in October. This is the Hunt for Planet 9, and it's fascinating. He did a series of, I believe, 12 videos in all on his channel on this, and I binge watched them. So make sure you check us out for that. Don't forget, special announcement, we've got a conversation on the death penalty with David Packman on the 16th of October at 8 p.m. Eastern. MythCon. Make sure you get your tickets for MythCon September 22nd. You can also win them here. And finally, our podcast is back up, the second season. We're on tomorrow will be episode number 31. We just did episode number 30 today. And you can get us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, any streaming platform. If you don't want to see our beautiful mugs, then you can listen to us anytime, anywhere. Yeah. I almost got it down. I almost sound like, I feel like Billy Mays, you know, the OxyClean guy.
He's dead.
Every time. I know he's dead.
So he's not
But
sounding
wait.
like much.
But wait,
the hell
there's
is wrong with
more.
Well, there's more.
Jesus. Are you grumpy today, Steve? You look grumpy.
No, I'm not grumpy. I'm just saying he
You're like a
doesn't talk
curmudgeon.
much now that he's dead.
I have
I am
been
a
waiting for so
curmudgeon.
long to use that word, curmudgeon.
That's a great word because I am like a
It is a
typical
great word.
curmudgeon. Yeah.
You're a curmudgeon. Okay, so we've
Don't
been
get
getting
there.
some messages and comments and people emailing us saying that they wanted to have a little segment on this show between Steve and I where we talk about topical things, you know, just randomness, and of course our guests are invited to get involved in the conversation, but people just wanted to for some reason hear Steve and I's opinions on things, so we decided we would start a 5-minute segment at the start of each show, and we're going to call this segment the go ahead, throw it up there, Dave. The Red Herring Report. And we have we're doing kind of like a little partnership with the guys at National Day Calendar, because I think that some of the days that we celebrate here in this country, you know, Owen family, have you ever woken up and seen the Today Show where they're talking about today is National blah 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 day, you know, pineapple on pizza day, just random days. So I reached out to Marlo, who's the guy.
Besides those.
Oh, well, I can tell you. I reached out to Marlo, the guy that owns National Day Calendar, where they get all these from, and he has a committee that goes through tens of thousands of submissions every year, and this committee selects a set number every year. And basically, what we've kind of worked out with them is we're going to do a when we can and when it's relevant. And I told him that it's going to be satirical. Like, I'm not going to be promoting, so to speak, these days, because some of them I'm going to be tearing into just because they're so ridiculous. But he was fine with that. And we'll also learn about some of the days that got rejected. When that time comes, we'll do a segment on the process of how those days are selected, the committee that goes through, the ones that they choose. And I'm going to try to talk him into actually giving us a day of our own. That's a pipe dream that I have. We'll see if it comes to fruition. But today is National Just Because Day. And it is just like you would think. It's a day that you can do anything you want just because. And to me, that's every day. So I don't see this being anything special. But briefly, the history of this is their research indicates that National Just Because Day was created by Joseph Goodwin of Los Gatos, California in the late 1950s. It began as a family holiday and has grown into an annual celebration across the United States. They even have directions on how to celebrate National Just Because Day, and you will never guess how you're supposed to celebrate National Just Because Day. Any guesses?
No. Does it involve pineapple hats?
Just
Well-
because, why not? Sure.
No,
Just
that's
because.
literally do something just because. So
Mhm.
I I got some messages over the past couple weeks, very randomly. I get random messages either through the comments or through like Facebook or Twitter, and people were asking
I
me
think we
if I
sent
have.
some as well.
Yes, those are special messages though. I keep those in like. But they were asking me if I had any pets, and I figured this would be a good time to maybe introduce you guys to my little guy that's been with me for 7 years now. He's just about to turn 8. And I got this little guy when he was just after he was born. And I was at that time getting into like video editing. And so I created, the day that I brought him home, I created a kind of an anthology of this little guy for the first year that we were together. And so I created a movie trailer about my dog in our first year. So we're going to play that now. I made it in 2012. And then when we come back, we'll actually bring the guy on and see how he reacts to the limelight for a few seconds. So enjoy. And here's Archie now.
He's pretty cute.
Looks exactly like Size Strike.
He's probably 30 pounds overweight, but that's okay. Okay.
Is he related to Size Strike? Like cousins or something?
Probably. While I take him back downstairs, please, Digital Hammurabi, will you introduce yourselves, your channel, and what you guys specialize in?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Megan. This is Josh. Our channel is Digital Hammurabi, and we specialize in Mesopotamia and the study of the ancient Near East. Josh got his PhD 2 years ago.
Sure.
Probably, yeah, we're going with 2 years ago from Johns Hopkins. I am still studying because I just am. I'll be there for another couple of years and then I'll be done. And we do Sumerian and Akkadian, and Josh does a lot of Hebrew and ancient art and literature and just a whole bunch of really cool, interesting stuff that amazingly other people seem to be interested in as well. I always thought it was just us. And it's not, which is amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess our big goal is to try to make this sort of out there, esoteric ivory tower stuff accessible to regular people.
By regular people, he means people who don't have some kind of brain problem that leads them to spend 12 hours a day in a library.
Yes, that's true.
Sensible people.
Yeah, good.
12 hours a day. You guys do a how to write Sumerian too.
Yep, Josh is teaching a Sumerian grammar class, which has about 6 or 7 people on the mailing list, which is about the size of a regular Sumerian graduate student class at Hopkins. So
and actually,
that's not bad.
the number one, the highest viewed video on our channel is Learn to Read Sumerian Lesson 1.
How cool is that? How are they doing?
Yeah. Yeah, very well, actually.
It's a nice slow pace, which means that people can really take their time, and like, if you work a full-time job, the last thing you want to do is come home and then spend 8 hours learning Sumerian. So
yeah,
I mean, the difficulty with something like Sumerian is you know, there are a lot of people that want to learn Hebrew. There are a lot of people that want to learn Greek because the Bible is written in those languages. So there are all these like easy to use basic grammars that you can go down to Barnes and Noble and get, and kind of work your way through. It's not that way with Sumerian. So people ask, you know, is there like a basic grammar that I can get and read? No, there's not yet, but I'm writing one. So this video series is sort of the basis for that. So it's designed specifically for that reason, to make it so that the average person can sit down and at their own pace learn to read Sumerian.
That's awesome. You know what, Steve? I think you'll agree with me. It's amazing to see the stage presence between now and the first time we had them on, isn't it?
Oh yeah, they've definitely come into their own. I mean, I remember they first kind of came onto the scene, and they're like a little bit hesitant, a little bit reserved, a little bit not quite sure about how all this works. And now it's like they're pros.
Now you got shooting these.
I wouldn't go that far.
Is that true, Steve?
Now they're putting out videos every
Because
day.
see, Steve, in order for you to say that that's true, you have to borrow from my worldview. So
I don't mind borrowing from your worldview. I just don't understand any of it. I'm going to be watching that video. Actually, I've been meaning to learn to read Sumerian lesson 1, just to see if I can just glean anything from it. But yeah, that's going to be my next to watch video for sure.
you'll pick it up like that.
Great. Such a proud moment. Such a proud moment. I just stand in awe right now. So,
you guys are weirdly like our YouTube parents.
oh God, you got shafted. You got shafted. So we figured that we would bring you on to talk about probably the most well-known, I guess, isn't it, the most well-known Sumerian text or out of that region and that time frame. And since we talk about religion, although we've kind of veered off from that in a while, but I think it's something that not a lot of people know, that Noah actually was not the first wave rider or wave runner in the ark. Does that work? I think it works. It was actually the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I think that not a lot of people know that story is actually a version of this one. And so I thought it might be cool to kind of go through the Epic of Gilgamesh and touch on the parts that are similar to that story and where it may, get where Noah's flood may come out of that, and then the parts that are obviously different for that culture. So yeah, I leave it to you guys, the maestros of ancient Mesopotamia, to put us on a boat and take us sailing.
Sure.
Mind if I give like a little? So probably the thing to start with is an understanding that the story didn't start off as an epic, as a combined whole. So we know that it dates at least to, if not earlier, the beginning of the second millennium BCE. And these, when you read through the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is an Akkadian text, in Standard Babylonian, Akkadian from, the late second millennium, maybe the 12th, 11th, 10th century, something like that. That's somebody that's come along. It's attributed to a scribe who has taken these somewhat disparate Sumerian stories, at least originally Sumerian stories, and crafted them into this continuous narrative with a sorry, our cat is pulling at something. So originally, the king Gilgamesh, he was the king of Uruk down in southern Mesopotamia, and probably was a real king. We have decent evidence for him. I don't think that it's conclusive. I was actually pushed a little bit on that a couple of months ago, and I had to say it's not conclusive, but we do have decent evidence that a Gilgamesh did exist. and that he was a king in Uruk. But certainly he became a legendary figure.
And was then worshipped as a god at some point as well.
And stories developed, individual stories developed in Sumerian about him. And in addition to these stories about Gilgamesh, so Gilgamesh and Aga, Gilgamesh and Huwawa, who in the Akkadian version of the epic is Humbaba.
Death of Enkidu.
The death of, Gilgamesh Enkidu in the Netherworld, the death of Gilgamesh, all these other stories are sort of floating around in scribal schools in Sumerian. And in addition, we have what's called the Sumerian flood story. And the Sumerian flood story features a guy named 🀭Suja, and he's your early Noah character. And again, he's, the story at least dates to the early second millennium, maybe earlier, but that's what we know. And these Sumerian stories were likely in maybe the 18th century BCE, initially crafted into an Old Babylonian epic. So an epic from the period that's called the Old Babylonian period. So that time from about 2000 to 1600 BCE. And we have fragments of it. We think there was an epic in that time. But by the time you get to the end of the second millennium, and please jump in and stop me at any moment, I know you will. It has been crafted into this masterpiece, really, called the Epic of Gilgamesh in Akkadian. And it has a very clear, it has what I consider, and I think many consider to be a clear set of lessons isn't the right word, but points that it's trying to get across, emphases that it has. And it incorporates not all, but many of these early Gilgamesh stories that were in Sumerian, and it brings in this Sumerian flood story. It's done in a way that it doesn't look like it's haphazardly thrown together. It all fits together actually very neatly. And so I think before we get into the actual story, I thought it was probably a good idea to sort of give the background to that. So the stories were originally in Sumerian at the latest early second millennium. And they came into Akkadian. They were translated into Akkadian because Sumerian died as a language, as a spoken language, and Akkadian became the common language at the time. And so they were translated into Akkadian and brought into probably an early epic form. But this epic form was developed in the late second millennium, and it's what we see today. So if you go down, I see that for a second. If you go down and buy the Penguin Classics, Epic of Gilgamesh, that's primarily what you're going to be looking at is the Standard Babylonian, second millennium, late second millennium, Akkadian Epic of Gilgamesh. So,
and who wrote it originally?
So it's attributed to a scribe called Sinleki Unini, who may or may not have existed. He's kind of like a semi-mythological ancestor of a lot of scribal families. They kind of say, we can trace our lineage all the way back to Sinleki Unini. And the tablets, some of the Gilgamesh tablets we have say this was written by Sinleki Unini, but we don't know for a fact if he actually existed. Certainly by the time you've got these later scribal families talking about him, he's become like this mythological figure, like a patron saint of scribes, kind of.
I mean, in the same way, I think that if you look at the the early Israelites or the other Israelites in the middle of the first millennium, they're trying to give their lineage, their history, So they trace themselves back to the patriarchs, right? So they tell stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And did these people actually exist? Probably not. But it's you're trying to. It's very important in the ancient world to have this, lineage that you can trace back. And so you have these families, these scribal families in the first millennium, that we know that they existed. They're very real scribal families. But as part of their heritage and prestige, they trace their lines back to these well-known scribes. So Sinlake Unini is the one that edited, put together the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's not to say that he didn't exist. He very well may have.
We just don't have a lot of evidence for him besides the tablets themselves.
Are there any originals left? Do we have any of the original tablets?
Oh yeah.
So by original, do you mean the original Sumerian stories, or the later Akkadian revisions?
Like the first,
yes to both.
I guess, writing of cool, excellent.
Yeah, and in fact, it's for anybody watching that is contemplating what they're going to do. If they're getting ready to go to college, they don't know what they're going to do. Sumerian, baby, because I studied theology. I went to seminary, learned Greek and Hebrew, and it was always so frustrating because you're always working with these really late, relatively speaking, copies. There are no autographs. You don't have the one that first Isaiah or second Isaiah sat down and wrote, right? Because that's gone. Then I got to Sumerian and Akkadian. It was like, oh, look, here's the scribe's thumbprint in the clay. There, you can see it. This is the one that he wrote. This thing's
That's kind of cool.
5,000 years old, 4,000 years old. He wrote his name at the bottom. He said,
and his dog walked across it at some point as well.
That's
so
hilarious.
yeah, the tablets, they date a lot of the tablets, right? You can tell this was written on a Thursday. I mean, it's really it's really cool.
Did they do like stick figures or doodling on the sides like people do on like notebook paper?
I can't
There had to be some.
think of any off the top of my head.
There is a so I would suspect you wouldn't find much of that. There's a literary text called School Days that was edited by Samuel Noah Kramer, and it's the story. It's a literary account of a boy's day at school, and if you hear the story, you wouldn't expect him to doodle.
You get beaten.
Yeah, the story is he goes to school and his teacher says, "Why didn't you write that correctly? I was caned. Why did you speak out when you weren't supposed to? I was caned.
So no hangman or
you
anything
came out
like
the
that.
hallway when you didn't have a hall pass. I was caned." So
They had hall passes back
how
then? That's wild.
yeah.
How do they fix their mistakes in these clay tablets? Like they didn't have like whiteout or something. I mean, how did they? And what do they do? They write it in and they baked it or something to make it
You smooth over
solidified
it
or something.
while it's still
Yeah.
You
wet.
just smooth
You
over
just
it
smooth over
and
the
then
clay and then
so you'd
rewrite
write
it.
in it, and then that would just naturally get hardened, or they actually like bake that or something.
They would fire some.
Yeah.
They would sunbake others.
Probably just put it in the oven.
If you picture it, if this is the size of a of a tablet and this is a stylus, if you were to go get some Sculpey, moldable, bakeable clay from Michael's or Joanne Fabrics or whatever, don't judge me. And you form it into like a shape like this, you can actually take a chopstick and kind of sharpen it down, and you can impress wedges into the clay, and then if you mess one up, you just sort of take your thumb and rub it, and it's like an eraser. It just smooths the clay out. And we actually have a lot of tablets where the left side of the tablet is it's a school tablet, and it's very clearly written in this beautiful
Professional
calligraphy
almost.
Right. You could tell that the teacher wrote the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you have these sort of, ill-formed attempts to copy what's on the left. And if you look at it from the side, you'll see that this side over here is very thin, because what they did is it was a practice tablet. This side stayed the same, and what they would do is they'd copy it out, and then they'd erase it by smoothing it out and then write it again. It's called a palimpsest. And so you have these very thin half over here where it's just been rubbed down.
That's very green. That's very renewable. They were forward thinking. My question is, do you have any tablets of like the school kids with one passing to the other? Do you like me? Check yes or no in the little tablets. And how would you pass a tablet?
I have not seen.
I haven't. I wish I had, but I haven't.
But they may exist, and the Illuminati are just withholding that information.
They probably just sent text messages. It's a lot easier.
But what's, not to get off on too much of a tangent, but one of the really cool things about this is that you don't just have the tablets themselves. We have oftentimes their archaeological contexts. So from the city of Sippar, for example, during the Old Babylonian period, we actually have dug down and found what we know to be a schoolhouse. And it's a private home, but there's actually it's not a pit, but it's like a drum. That's not, but a place, a little place where they would recycle the clay tablets. They'd put them in there, let them soak, and then they everything would smooth out, and then they could reform the clay. And we have House F in Nippur, where we had thousands and thousands and thousands of school tablets. And I did my part of my dissertation on scribal education, so I know a little bit about this. That's why I'm waxing on and on about it. Please feel free to stop me.
Well, no, you're.
But
my question is before we move on, I'm fascinated about the how did they get left? You know what I mean? Like when that society kind of died out, I guess. And the tablets that you guys found, what kind of condition and locations do you find them in? Are they stored somewhere? Are they just kind of scattered around everywhere? Like when people left this area, did they purposely leave these tablets behind, or what happened there?
Yes and no. So you find tablets in all kinds of different places. I work on royal inscriptions quite often. Those are inscribed on stone or metal tablets, which are buried in temple foundations deliberately as a ritual act. You also find a lot of old, trashed clay tablets used as fill for building houses. So to level out the ground, they just throw pottery and broken tablets down and make the ground level before they built up. So we find a lot of stuff in there. You also find old archives, old documentation that people kept and then either moved out of their house and didn't take it with them because it was no longer relevant, or had to leave in a hurry because of war and didn't get to take all of their records with them. There's also a lot of palace archives. I'm thinking especially of the stuff from the palace at a place called Mari, which is around Syria on the Euphrates. That palace was razed to the ground by Hammurabi, and then his soldiers went in and packed up all the tablets they could find, because it was quite important diplomatic correspondence that tells them who their allies are talking to and who their enemies are talking to. They boxed all this stuff up and labeled it, and they took the stuff they wanted and left the stuff they didn't. So we have the correspondence basically that Hammurabi didn't want because it wasn't useful to him. And a lot of this literary stuff also comes from Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh. I don't actually know. I think you should talk.
I mean, the other thing that's really important is it's somewhat morbid, but destruction as an archaeologist best friend, right? So when there's a fire, that's really good news, right? It
bakes all the tablets.
Yeah, because it's not papyrus, it's not paper, it's clay.
Right.
And so heat is
But
awesome.
they had papyrus back then, though, right? I mean, papyrus has been around for 5,000 years,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Mhm.
why did
readily
they use
available
it?
in Mesopotamia?
So
Yeah, and
is it
there are other things that we use,
availability?
like
Availability was
wax
more than
ring.
anything else.
Hmm?
It was due to more availability, lack of availability of the papyrus.
Yeah, I mean,
I suspect.
I mean, papyrus is very, relatively speaking, difficult to make,
Yeah.
right? There's cutting the strips and then soaking it, and lining it and then letting it dry, and then it's not easy to write on, and again, it's something that's not as durable, and of course, clay is you find a loam pit or something, and you're good to go. So it's easy. If you're writing a receipt or something, let's say Megan, I'm at the temple, and Megan has to pay her taxes, and she comes and she has to give me 2 sheep and a goat, right, in order to pay her taxes. Well, I'm the scribe at the temple. I've got to write a receipt for her so that she can prove later I paid my taxes. Here's the receipt that shows that I paid my 2 sheep and 1 goat. And I, as the temple scribe, need to keep track of how many sheep and how many goats we have. And I don't want to go out in the field every time and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Stop moving, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what I have to do as a scribe is I have to get a tablet, and they're not terribly big, a lot of these things, and write Megan Lewis, 2 sheep, 1 goat, signed Josh Bowen. Here, Megan Lewis, 2 sheep, 1 goat, signed Josh Bowen, Temple Archive. And then what I would do after I get a bunch of these little tablets, and they're all in a pile somewhere, I would take a big tablet and I would neatly draw these cases, and I would transfer all the information from the individual tablets onto this compilation tablet. And now I've got this big tablet instead of having all these little individual tablets.
So you have a master ledger.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's exactly right.
They would have loved the iPad back then, wouldn't they?
Oh man.
Could have come in handy, yeah.
So what is the before we move on to the back to the Epic, what is the most scandalous or surprising thing that you guys have found on the tablets? Like the most, either gossip worthy or just completely shocking, like somebody wrote this down. They had to have like a National Enquirer tablet back then. That's what I'm getting at. Like, did they have a Bat Boy tablet?
The good fake news.
No, they had. I like personal letters the best. There was one that I translated in maybe my first year of Akkadian, and it was this guy writing to a relative, basically saying, "The rats you sent me were delicious. Please send more." Which was amazing.
Okay.
And then there's it was great. I was like, oh, rats, cool, okay. And then my
They were
other
delicious.
favorite
They were supposed to be pets. That would have been
Frank,
funny.
what are you
Get a
doing?
response. Yeah, they were pets. What are you doing?
They're so good. And then there's a group of letters that I think I talk about every single time I'm on camera, called the Old Assyrian merchant letters.
You were going to write your dissertation on it.
I was. They're my favorites. But they're letters sent between merchants and their families. They were separated by 6 months travel. And there's a lot of them from wives who were left at home writing to their husbands, basically saying, you need to send more money. I don't have enough money to buy food. We can't buy lamp oil. When are you coming home? I like those ones.
Thanks,
and the Amana letters, which are my third favorite, I guess, because you get things like the king of Assyria or the king of Babylon writing to the king of Egypt saying, I had a cold last week and you didn't come and visit me.
Why don't you come visit me?
What gives, dude? Or you didn't come to my housewarming party. How rude. Yeah.
I can see some mother doing that. You don't visit any longer.
Exactly.
This gives me a good idea. The next time you guys are on, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do letters where you come on and we read their letters. I think that would be fascinating. But it sounds like society as a whole hasn't changed very much. Like we still bitch about the same things that they did back then. We don't eat rats, so there is a silver lining. We
But I hear they're
don't have to
delicious.
eat rats.
You know, one of the neat things, though, I think when you consider these corpora is, you know, we get so much monumental, so many of these monumental inscriptions, so many of these elite writings. You know, these well-trained scribes are putting down things for the king. And if you know, when you look at scribal education, particularly in the Old Babylonian period, early second millennium, the training that a scribe went through, particularly at a city like Nippur, which is a really important scribal city, you know, they had to learn all these different cuneiform signs. You know, it's not an alphabet that they write with. It's all these different individual signs that have all these different syllabic values. One sign could be the be. It could mean be, ba, bot, bot, or till. Just depends on the way that it's used in a sentence. And so you know, it's this extensive amount of training that they have to go through to write these inscriptions and to write these literary texts. And it's neat to see this old Assyrian archive of merchants, because what they did is they sort of, instead of learning, you know, 700 signs with all their different values, they boiled it down to what, 40?
Something like that.
40 or 80, that might be 80 different signs. And they all have these pretty standard values. So it's much easier to learn. And they wrote. And so you get to see this sort of behind the scenes. They're not writing monumental inscriptions. As a matter of fact, we have a couple of literary texts, at least one. You have some incantations and stuff that they wrote in this script, and it's just neat to see something that wasn't meant for public viewing consumption or the gods' consumption. It's really just meant for day-to-day individual interaction. So
it's awesome. I'm fascinated now.
Do you think there's a lot of these tablets left? I mean, do you think there's a whole bunch that we haven't found yet? I mean, if you had to estimate how many we found, so they're ubiquitous. They're not like they're rare anymore, but they're still finding more and more. Do you think they're going to find something that's ever going to be comparable to something like the Epic of Gilgamesh?
Oh yeah, so
that would be fragments.
well, yes and no. So here's sort of the you know, this is sort of the problem, right? You know, when you hear about places like the Museum of the Bible that just got busted for having all these illegal tablets in their possession, the reason that that's such a big deal is, how can Christians do something like that?
Not the Bible.
The reason that that's such a big deal outside of just general moral principle is it's so easy to walk out to a tell, out to a mound, out in a rock, dig down in 10 or 12 different places and come up with a tablet. You know, it's a lot easier than you would expect. And once you come down on one,
there are going to be more.
Yeah, you usually have found a cache of some sort, right? And so what happens
the difference is though,
if there's a
those were directed by God. God told them to go out there and get them, so that doesn't really count.
Okay, good. It's good to know that smuggling can be divinely ordained.
Let us pray.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
But the horrible part of this is that once somebody once it's known that there's a market for this and that people will pay top dollar for these things, people go out to these sites and just loot, right? And so you go over there and there's just holes everywhere, right? All these tablets are taken out. So for example, with the Museum of the Bible example, these tablets were excavated. They were very important tablets from a city that we don't know where it is yet.
We've heard of it. It's written about in other tablets. We know that it exists somewhere, but archaeologists haven't located it yet. And looters clearly have, because all of these tablets are turning up on the black market from this city. We don't know where it is, and we're not going to now because all of the stuff has been.
And there are Syriologists like David Owen up at Cornell, and he needs to get his hands on these tablets, at least a little bit, to at least translate them, make hand copies of them, figure out what they say. But he never got the chance because they were in the possession of the Museum of the Bible, and then they were taken by the government and sent back to Iraq, and we'll never see him again, right? In all likelihood.
Is that
so now?
Is that city they were looking for Atlantis?
Quite possibly.
Excellent. I knew it was all connected. I knew it.
Yeah.
See, guys,
Always.
we break news here. Okay, so let's jump into the epic, and I'm not very familiar with it, to be honest with you, so I'm just going to let you kind of lead the way, or start where you want to, and hit the whatever points you feel are necessary.
Do you want a synopsis or just the highlights?
Oh,
Yeah, we can do a summary of it if you want.
Let's go to highlights, because the way that we ask questions, if we go through the whole thing like piece by piece, we'll be here until 2019 probably.
That's true.
I mean, I can. You want to? Okay. So basically, the story is about Gilgamesh, and he's trying to find immortality, right? He's trying to gain immortality, and so in the beginning of the story, he's a king of Uruk, and he's abusing his citizenry, and so the gods create this guy Enkidu, and he's a wild man, and he's his match. He's his equal. They end up fighting and then becoming best friends, and they decide that they're going to go out to the cedar forest, and they're going to kill this god of the cedar forest, 🀭.
Kind of in an effort to do this one amazing deed so that their names will live on forever.
Right, which is a big Mesopotamian thing.
They do it. It's a massive problem because actually 🀭 is a good guy. He was put there by one of the high and mighty Mesopotamian deities, so they get in trouble, and Enkidu is sadly the one who has to pay the price, and he dies.
So, they both come back
again,
and the highlights that we'll give are the cool parts. So Ishtar, Inanna Ishtar, she thinks Gilgamesh is really hot, and she says, "Hey, let's get it on." And
he says,
"Yeah, that's what he said, bitch, please."
Is that a quote from the tablet?
So she gets all,
Is that a quote from the tablet? Let's get it on.
It is a direct quote.
Yeah. They wrote in English back then as well. You may not be aware of
just
this.
like the Bible.
I knew it.
It was in the King James version, so.
I thought the King James would have a Sumerian version as well. This is good to know that my thoughts were dead on.
They're honed. So Ishtar goes up to her dad, Anu up in heaven, and says, I've been.
He dissed me.
Yeah, he dissed me. Give me this animal called the Bull of Heaven, and I'm going to bring the Bull of Heaven down, and it's going to destroy Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Well, of course, when she does, Gilgamesh and Enkidu kill the Bull of Heaven, and they rip off part of its body, its haunch, and throw it at her. And so this is just too much. They've killed 🀭.
And for anyone who knows anything about Ishtar, that is a bloody stupid thing to do, because she is vengeful and mean and destroys mountains and kills people, and the guy she married ends up being sent to the underworld because of her, and it's just a very, very stupid thing to do.
Which part did they throw at her? I think that's important.
The haunch. Yeah, the haunch.
I always
they could have done better.
To be the testicles, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not. It's funny because when they throw it at her, she gathers all her priestesses around, and they all pray over it, and anyway, mourn it. Anyway.
If I was a scribe back then, I would change the body part that they threw at her.
Yep. Me too.
So the gods decree that Gilgamesh is too important to die, so Enkidu is going to die. So when he does, Gilgamesh realizes his own mortality. and he weeps over Enkidu for 7 days, and the text says he weeps over him until a maggot falls out of his nose. And at that point, he goes on this journey to find Utanapishtim, who is the Noah character. And, if you look at something like the Babylonian map of the world, we did a daily data video on this for anybody watching that wants to see it. It's this rendering it's this map that they put in a clay tablet that has Babylon at the center of the map, and then there's a circle around it that is the ocean, and then there are these points that go off, these mountainous regions that go off, that are called the Nagu, that are just these regions. And on one of them is Utanapishtim. He's the distant one. He's at the edge of the world, right? At the other, sorry.
No, I was just going to say he's the guy who survived the flood and was given immortality by the gods as like a reward for being amazing and wise and not dying like the rest of humanity.
And that's the reason that he's such an important figure to Gilgamesh, because Gilgamesh is going to go find him and say, how did you get the gods to give you immortality?
I want it to.
Yeah. Because now he's tried to get fame through doing these mighty deeds. That has backfired.
He's lost his best friend.
Right.
His brother has died in front of him.
Yeah, and now death is staring him in the face, right? Mortality has gripped him. So he goes on this journey. He goes through the passage that the sun god Shamash takes every day. He races the sun, and he gets to the end of the world, the edge of the world, and to the bar that's out there, which is what you would expect at the edge of the world. And
So it's a
doesn't
world.
get drunk, which is what I would have done.
yeah, and the barmaid, Sidori, right? The barmaid says, "Look, there's a boat that can take you across the water to where Utanapishtim is, and it's this boat is manned by 🀭Shanabi, and 🀭Shanabi has these stone men. It's really bizarre. These stone men that push the boat, right?
Because the boat has to cross the waters of death.
Yeah.
If you get in the waters of death, it's kind of like the Greek idea. If you get in this water, you will die.
Yeah.
So stone men
The sti-
can't die. They can just push the boat through the
Right.
water. Makes perfect sense.
So
Like the river
Gilgamesh, the whole what you see throughout the entire epic is that Gilgamesh is this.
He's a fucking moron.
Yeah, he's young, impetuous. He doesn't think things through. So he finds 🀭Shanabi and the stone men, and he falls on them and destroys all the stone men.
Great.
After having been told
He sounds
this
like a-
is your only way to your destination.
Did your
Sounds
soul
like
get
me.
trapped
This
in the
is-
water too?
In ancient Babylonian,
If
right
you
here.
jump in
This would- I would.
If you jump in the water and die, does your soul get trapped as well?
Don't know.
some mythos,
Didn't
the water-
really
the
have
water
the same
entraps the
conception of
soul.
soul. I don't think that there was the same understanding of a soul.
Yeah, it probably just would have been a
Just
a
death.
trip to the nether world.
Yeah.
Was this
And
world
so,
flat?
Yes.
yes, just like the Bible.
Checkmate.
Just like the rest of the
Lord.
ancient Near East.
There you go, globe tarbs.
So 🀭Shanabi says to Gilgamesh, all right, look, there's a way that we can do this still. Go cut these long poles, 300 of them, and we can punt along, right? The problem is that the reason you need 300 of them, if you've ever punted, you push down on the pole, but then you got to pull it back up, and that means you touch the waters of death. So what he had to do is he had to take a pole, punt forward, and then just drop it and grab the next one. Anyway, so they make their way across the water to death, and they reach Utanapishtim, and Utanapishtim tells the story of the flood. And we can go into more detail about that.
It's complete with humanity is too noisy, so must be exterminated. And
But I mean, we can, if you want, since we're going to do that in detail, we can come back to that. So he tells the story of the flood. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'll finish it. We're almost done. Sorry.
Sure.
So he tells the story of the flood and says, because of I survived the flood, the gods convened in an assembly and decided that I was going to get immortality, and they placed me out here at the edge of the world. So, you can't get the gods to convene for you. Anyway,
you can't do what I did.
Yeah. So there's this whole thing about going to sleep. It doesn't matter anyway. So Gilgamesh is getting ready to leave, and 𝀭Support wife, Utnapishtim's wife, says, "Don't send him off empty-handed." So Utnapishtim says, "All right, look, there's this plant of life that it's down under the water. I'll tell you where it's at. If you get it, it will rejuvenate you." Right. So Gilgamesh ties stones to his feet, goes down to the bottom of the water, grabs the plant of life, comes back up, and impetuous and stupid as he is, he says, "I'm not going to try it right now because I don't really trust Utnapishtim.
I'm going to take it home and test it on the old men there.
I'm gonna give
if
it to
they become young, then I also will eat it."
So he starts his trip
What?
back home, and he gets hot and sweaty, and he stops by this pool of water, puts down the plant of life, gets in the water, and a snake smells the plant, comes up, eats it, sheds its skin, and now the plant is gone. And so
What a dummy.
Gilgamesh, yeah, it's very anticlimactic, honestly.
Because he ends up back at Uruk on top of the city walls,
Yeah.
just gazing out at his kingdom.
The important thing about the story, though, is that in the beginning it says, look at the walls, look at the city, look how well formed it is. Look at the tablet box that holds the story of Gilgamesh. Take it out and read it and hear about, the troubles and whatever. And at the end of the story, it says the same thing. And so it's an inclusio, right? It's a story that the beginning is like the end. And so it basically creates this circle, so that the story is retold and retold and retold, which is the whole point, right? This is how
he fails to gain actual physical immortality, but people retell his story in perpetuity.
And
So he gains immortality that way.
That's right.
That's poetic, almost.
It is.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, are there parts to this story that are true or based on truth? I know, obviously, not like the river of death and the plant and all that, but were there certain aspects on it that could be based on like real life events that happened, or is it all just a story?
I don't know about real life events. There are places that are mentioned that, like the cedar forest where the monster Humbaba lives, that is like a mythological representation of the cedar forests of Lebanon, which were very famous. Mesopotamia, not known for its trees. There's a reason they built everything out of mud brick, because there was just no timber anywhere. So kings, as one of their kingly royal deeds, would often take expeditions out to get, they didn't have much in the way of metal either, so they'd take expeditions out to get metal
stone,
metal, stone, and go to Lebanon and cut down these cedar trees to be used to make roofs for temples and doors and probably boats, and furniture. Wood doesn't last so well in the archaeological record, so exactly how much wood was used is not really known. But so we know that was a real place, and
Uruk is a real place.
Yeah, Uruk is a real place, a real city, fantastically excavated city, and I think
That's an interesting point,
is.
because you wouldn't think that mud ships would do so well on the seas.
Yep.
And that's in Iraq, right? Uruk would be located in Iraq. Yeah, that's weird to think that Iraq has such cultural significance, but they really did play a big part in all this stuff, huh?
To my next question on that, you remember a couple years ago when ISIS broke into that museum and just demolished all of that stuff in Iraq?
Yeah.
Was that anything? Did that contain anything from this time period?
We cried.
Yeah.
So yes,
it was horrible.
It was awful.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Pretty irreplaceable stuff.
Yeah.
But yes.
So let's jump into to Noah, and how these characters are different and how they're similar, and
Sure.
I guess start with the motivation for wanting to punish the planet. We know that the Bible, it was the sins of man that God wanted to exterminate the human race and start over. So is there a similar story with Samaria?
Kind of. So it's Sumer and Mesopotamia don't really have the same idea of sin that is so evident in the Christian Bible. You can piss a god off. That's not a good idea. That doesn't mean you've sinned, because the gods are capricious assholes sometimes. So you could look at one funny and they'd strike you dead, because how dare you look at them. So a lot of
the gods were very much like the people.
Yeah, they were just people,
which was the point,
with amazing
like Greek
powers.
mythology. It sounds a lot like Greek mythology.
It's
how
very
their
similar
gods
in the conception.
Petty and jealousy.
Yeah, exactly. So the impetus for the destruction of humanity in the flood narrative is that humans were too loud. We'd multiplied too vigorously, and there were too many people, and the gods couldn't sleep anymore, which made them very grumpy. So Enlil decides, Enlil is one of the main deities, he decides, screw this, I'm going to drown them all.
And this is not, this is not unique.
No.
So in the Enuma Elish, for example,
which is the Babylonian creation, the big famous Babylonian creation epic.
There's this roiling that takes place inside of Tiamat, and all the gods are really disturbed because of the noise, and it's all this commotion, and so this idea of there's this bothersome noise sort of thing. It's not unique to that text, I guess, and I think that's the big difference. Actually, Skylar and I were talking about this the other night. When you come to the biblical account of the flood, in all likelihood, the biblical flood account was written in Mesopotamia, right, during the Babylonian captivity, and so as sort of a counter story to the narratives that were in play in Mesopotamia and Babylonia. And so that the big difference is that Enlil's sort of a dick, right? He's like, they're too loud. I don't like them. And Ea, the Enki, Ea Enki, he has to come to the rescue very subtly, and he has to be very crafty about it. But he's the reason that the Noah character, in the Pishtem or 𝑒𝑭Sutra, is the reason that he survives, because
all the other gods there's a council of gods, and they all vote in favor of drowning humanity, because why the hell not? And Ea is like, whoa,
yeah,
I like these guys, they're fun, why are we killing them?
And there's a lot of depth to this, but that's the big difference, I think, in the flood account. And because the Bible in Genesis 6 goes to immense lengths to show how humanity had become just utterly wicked, right? Sin was the thing. And so God, he's sad that he's created humanity, because look at how wicked they've become. So now Yahweh is completely justified in destroying humanity, whereas you can tell when you read through the flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh or in the story of Atrahasis, it's just a dick move.
And actually, some of the gods while the flood is happening, and then after the flood, there's a goddess called Belet Ili, who's kind of like a birth goddess, starts realizing what they've done. Partly the issue in Mesopotamia is that humanity is the god's source of food. The offerings that you give at the temple physically sustain the gods. So they don't have offerings anymore, so they're starving. But she's like, what have we done? I've effectively killed my children. How could I do this? And you get this kind of accountability and regret in the divine action that you just simply don't see in the Bible.
I mean, in Atrahasis, Ea himself says,
Sorry, Atrahasis is the earlier Sumerian form of the flood story. Is it Sumerian?
it's
not
Akkadian.
Wow, how many
But,
iterations are there of the flood story? Seems like one iteration after
well,
another, just with things kind of tacked on.
There's the Sumerian flood story. There's Atrahasis has the flood story in it. So the Sumerian flood story has 𝑒osudra as the Noah character. Atrahasis
Medea
has
sequels.
Atrahasis.
Like Medea
I didn't hear
sequels,
you,
they just
Tom.
keep coming.
But these
Oh,
are
yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
iterations, right? I mean, they're not independent stories. There's a common thread that ties all these things together, right? So I would have to ask,
yeah,
why
sure.
is it like the
There's-
Epic of
there's-
Gilgamesh? Why is it with the Epic of Gilgamesh that's not generally taken seriously as anything more than just literary fiction, and yet the biblical narrative of the flood is actually literally believed by millions of people, contrary to any kind of scientific
Welcome to
evidence?
my world.
Why the
Gilgamesh
difference so much? What's that?
Oh, it's simply the book. Like Gilgamesh isn't a religious text of a modern current religion. I mean, it wasn't
But
a
if it
religious
was, you
text.
think
to
people would
begin
believe it? You think people would
Well,
believe
see,
it as
that's-
much as they
I
do
don't
the
know.
Bible narrative?
So it's interesting that you ask that. I've been interacting with people in the congregation of Lord Rael,
Oh,
who
lucky you.
This is good. This is good, Steve. You're gonna like this.
who you know, the belief in the congregation is that, and they're nice people, but Megan's holding back. Sorry, but the belief in the
I can feel it.
congregation is that in January 28th, 2011, the power of God returned and came upon a guy, I think out in Chicago, named Raymond Elwood, and he became Lord Rael, Raymond Elwood.
He's a reborn Mesopotamian god
He is
and reborn Jesus.
he is the god
Oh my
Enlil.
god.
So
Might as
Enlil
well give it a go. Might as well go
is
big, right?
Jesus. Yeah.
Exactly.
Why?
Um,
Why?
And so there is a cardinal in the organization named Richard Ruff, who is Enki
Another god.
reincarnated, who was Moses. So Enki is Moses, is Richard Ruff. And I've been interacting with Angelus Domini, who is the angel of our Lord. And, honestly, it's fascinating to me because of my background, my work with the Sumerian Pantheon and the Akkadian Pantheon and with the biblical text, and they, in a very interesting way, in a unique way, tie those together, right? So Jesus was Enlil, right? And it's, of course, so they've been very kind. Said, please ask us any questions that you want. They're on VK. Can't remember. It's a German like Facebook sort of thing. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
But
I know what you're talking about.
I've been asking questions, and fairly direct questions. And part of the problem is that part of the problem with their belief structure, in my opinion, is that you have to disregard in a lot of ways these texts that you're basing your belief structure on, right? So in Atrahasis, in the Sumerian flood story, in the Epic of Gilgamesh flood story, in this narrative, Enlil is bad.
He's the one trying to drown humanity, and Enki is
Enki's
the one figure trying to save everyone.
As a side note, if you didn't pick up on this, this group also fits in the Anunnaki, the Zachariah Sitchin. They wouldn't hold directly to Zachariah Sitchin's beliefs, but they think that he was a good scholar. But the Anunnaki are the divine pantheon, right? So I've asked multiple times members of the group to come on. I'm hoping that I think they're concerned that they're going to be like mocked or something. I don't.
They've probably seen this
I just
before.
honestly, Yeah, I mean, well, I want to. I mean, I understand their apprehension, but I mean, really, I would like to talk to someone that's knowledgeable on this, because there are questions that I have that, if they're really interested in proving this, one of the things that I said was, they made the statement, the claim that the gods that exist, Enlil, Enki, and the other members of the pantheon that they haven't revealed yet, can actually speak Sumerian, right? They can read and speak Sumerian and Akkadian. Well, that would be awesome, because
So that's something that's testable
that would be
in a way.
that's testable, and that would be some really great evidence.
They don't perform party tricks, though, Steve. We were told that in no uncertain term.
Of course
Clearly,
not.
So-
And did you say one of their names was Richard Ruff?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, do you actually think that Echidnu and Moses, that's where the story of Moses came from, or do you actually kind of think there was an actual guy named Moses, or do you think that's just a derivation of Echidnu?
Oh, I think it's
No,
probably a derivation of Sargon. Well, they're probably all part of this.
Right. So there's a king called Sargon, and there's a text called the birth legend of Sargon, in which the king is born in secret and then placed in a reed basket, sealed with pitch, and sent down the river. And that predates all of the Moses texts by quite some way.
I mean, I don't know the. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I wanted to go back to your question, Steve, briefly, of whether people actually would believe this story in the way that they believe the flood story in the Bible. I don't know, because Gilgamesh wasn't a religious text in the time it was written, but there is a group in Finland who have reinstituted the worship of Mesopotamian deities using, as far as I can tell, I haven't been able to talk to anyone. I really want to talk to someone because it sounds fascinating, but they've reinstituted Mesopotamian religion using translations of the original texts. And they are building a ziggurat in Finland, which is super cool and amazing. And I want to go there and see it.
What is that?
Sorry.
Ziggurat?
It's a Mesopotamian pyramid. It's a step pyramid.
It's
That's when
it is a pyramid, and it's not.
Yeah. So
like the ziggurat of your
Egyptian pyramids.
like one
The
of
ziggurat of
your
the Yeah.
They need a sphinx.
So, one of the things that I said to Skylar, Oliver, just sounds like Oliver's waking up. One of the things that I said to Skylar, and if people in your audience haven't seen it, Skylar and I are doing this read through the Bible live on air and have a little commentary about it. It's actually a lot of fun. But, asking, Kyle's talking about this, asking the question, what would people think about, why is it that this is such a debated thing? Why is it that people don't come to Mesopotamian texts, Sumerian texts, Akkadian texts, and fight about this stuff? The example that I give is in that creation story, the Enuma Elish. It talks about slicing Tiamat in half, the sea goddess, and throwing half of her body up into the sky to create the heavens, and then throwing the other half of her body down for the earth. And then Marduk, the god, takes her eye sockets and uses them to create the sources for the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. But nobody goes and tries to figure out using geological means where exactly an eye socket would figure in at the head of the Tigris River, right? Nobody would do that.
Are you sure? That makes sense to me.
Well, nobody does it that I know of. And that seems stupid, and that would seem silly to a Christian if you brought them in, like a fundamentalist Christian. They would say, well, of course, that's ridiculous. But it's no more ridiculous than some of the things that, of course, you guys see all the time. So,
absolutely not. My question stems from when it comes to his instructions on building the ark and then stocking the boat that he's gonna be on. What were those like? Are they similar to the Bible, or did he have a completely different? Number one, how old was he at the time that he built it? That's a big thing with the Bible. You had a 600-year-old man chopping down every tree in the forest building a boat.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head whether it's said how old Atrahasis was, but Atrahasis, the story is different in that sense. The boat is probably more of a square than it is a rectangle, or the Ken Ham depiction. But I haven't done studies on the dimensions of it.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that's strikingly different between these two stories is not only the fact that Yahweh is completely justified in destroying humanity, who is completely wicked, but the method that the Noah character employs while building this ark to be rescued. Of course, the Noah character, and we read a lot of this, of course, in the New Testament, but the Noah character is reported to have, tried to preach righteousness and preach salvation, from this coming flood for 100 years. While he built this thing, I think that's the figure. So he's actively telling people and warning people and trying to, and of course the flood is a model that's used to talk about the coming judgment of the Messiah, right? So the same thing happens. Whereas in Atrahasis, or in the Mesopotamian flood story, it's sort of secretive, right? Enki, the gods make a pact that they're not going to tell the humans that the flood is coming, right? And Enki promises, Enki is the god of wisdom, right? And Enki wants to preserve this knowledge that he has bestowed upon humankind, and he does so through the Noah character, Atrahasis. And so he wants to save Atrahasis. So what he does, instead of going down and breaking the oath and speaking to Atrahasis directly, Atrahasis is standing by a reed fence. And Enki goes down, or Ea goes down and says, reed fence, listen to this warning, right? So he's telling the reed fence. He's not actually telling Atrahasis. Atrahasis just happens to hear it.
That's funny.
And so Atrahasis tells the people of 🀭Support, the city that he's in, that he's governing over, that Enlil and Ea have determined that he can no longer stay in the city, that he has to go down to the place where Ea lives, called the Abzu. And so that's why he has to build this boat. It's very duplicitous. And as a matter of fact, once he loads everything on, the boat, if you read the Noah account in the Bible, God seals the boat, the hatch from the outside, right? Divinely seals it. In the Atrahasis story, Atrahasis has to have somebody seal it. And so what he does is he tells this guy, hey, look, if you seal this thing up, you can have my palace.
Nice.
I mean, it's like, yeah,
like
go ahead.
This story's a lot more true to human nature, I think, and what you expect the outcome
And there's
to be in every shape.
Isn't there also a part where he's after like 7 days they're looking for land, and he sends out a dove to see if there's any land out there?
Yep.
Which is another parallel to the biblical story. I think it's a dove, then it's like a raven, then it's like there's like a couple birds that he sent out, swallow or something. Yeah.
I think it's probably the most parallel, if you can say something like that, the most parallel.
Were there animals on the boat too?
Were there animals on the boat? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they had animals, grain. I mean, he was literally tasked, wasn't he, to build the boat, save his family, save these little baby animals. I think that's where Ken Ham got his narrative from, because when he was asking how they fit these animals in there, they were just baby animals. But I mean, there's a lot of parallels. I mean, I'm not big into the zeitgeist thing. I'm not big into the whole Horus and Jesus kind of thing. Those kind of stories, I don't see any relationship. But this has always been one that I actually did see a relationship, and I think there obviously is quite a bit of parallel between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical narrative. I mean, those are legit things you can go look at and see, okay, here's the story, here's what it says, here's the same thing with the biblical. They overlap quite a bit.
How'd they get a
Yeah,
T-Rex
and I mean,
on
and
there?
it's not. Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think the Epic
that's,
of Gilgamesh had a T-Rex.
you never can tell. No, and it's not just in the flood story where you have this overlap between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Bible. In the book of Kohelet, book of Ecclesiastes, there are parallels. Kohelet says to enjoy this life by taking the hand of your wife and embracing your children and washing your garments, making them white. And these are statements that you can find parallel quite closely in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The papers have been written, about this. But when I think about the flood story, when you have this presentation of the gods acting so capriciously, acting so human-like, as you guys have said quite aptly, it's very easy to write a counter story to that, where you show that your deity, Yahweh, is not affected by these human traits. He is transcendent. He is the one that is above this, capricious.
He may not be capricious, but he's
thought
judgmental.
process.
I mean, he's clearly judging humanity
absolutely.
and feeling justified
Yeah,
for what he does.
Sociopathic.
Yeah, but I think that's the key, is that the argument is in the biblical text that there's morality behind that. There's justification behind it. Whereas the gods are presented in a way that in the Sumerian text and in the Akkadian text that's not really an issue, right? Because these are, they're being portrayed in the same way that you would portray humans. They're just superhuman humans. That doesn't make any sense.
It's more honest.
Yeah,
It's more honest to the way that it would be in real life, I think.
Yes, I agree. Sorry.
There's the look. If you're playing the drinking game at home, you should be up to like 27. I think I've counted.
I thought we'd been better this time.
Next time, I'm gonna put a little counter up there on top of the nun's head. Just have a look counter.
Megan, do the look of "you're so wrong. Let me explain this." Do that kind of look to him. How's that look?
It should be pretty natural.
There you go. I love that's awesome. That's the no. Let me take this one. Look.
But yeah, Megan, we were just talking about the parallels between the Bible and the this flood story, and we're up to the animals and the motivation for the gods to destroy the earth. One was trying to put morality behind it, and the other was, just these guys are dicks and I'm tired of them. Let's clear them out.
Yep.
I got a question. Is the boat size mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh? Is it like the same size as the one in the Bible?
No, it is mentioned. It's differently constructed. Again, I haven't. When you get to the part in these texts about the numbers, it's very easy to kind of gloss over it because you go, yeah, I know this is describing the dimensions, and I don't really care. But no, it's not
the same.
No, it's not the same. But there are dimensions, and I would imagine that, without looking at it, I would imagine that the biblical arc is probably bigger, but I don't.
I have the measurements, but I don't.
What are
1 acre in area. See, 10 rods the height of her sides. If you know what a rod is.
Yeah, that's the other problem. Is that you have to, like a cubit's 18 inches. You're good with that, but getting into some of these other sizes, when you come through in the Akkadian, you're like a rod. Yeah, I don't feel like going to.
There's no tablet out there that says, okay, this much is a rod, and they actually draw it out.
Yeah.
We just don't.
Yeah, there's a section of this series called RLA, Real Lexicon de Seriologie.
It's like a massive encyclopedia.
And yeah, there's a section called Maße und Gewichte, which is this really long section about weights and measures.
In German.
That one's in English.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, the title's in German, but it's
I
all in
understand.
English, which makes it great. Of course, we're fluent in German, no question. In case our advisors are watching, we can read German, no problem.
9.
But
No sprechen die Deutsch.
Bless you.
I just had a genius idea. What would be a great competition to Ken Ham's Ark is for them to build a Gilgamesh version of the Ark encounter.
Yeah, they got room for it there. I mean, have you ever looked at the Ark?
That would be amazing.
Have you-
Like dicks, last resort, yelling shit at you as you walk by.
If you get
Great.
a chance, go Google the Ark in Williamston, Kentucky. Go. The parking lot is like 3 times bigger than the Ark itself. Go compare it. Go to Google.
No,
I'm not even lying. Go to
company.
Google Map Earth and look at the difference. The parking they expected was huge, and they never filled up like not even like a fourth of it. It's never filled up.
Oh my God.
So they had very high expectations that didn't come to fruition. That's for sure.
Why
Well,
would
there's
you wanna
definitely
go
enough
there?
room for us to build an ark then.
I don't know. Well, they don't. There's no repeatability. It's not like you go there more than once, right? I mean, who would want to get an annual pass to go see that? I have no idea. He expected 2 million annual. He got about half that. His opening weekend was the biggest weekend they've ever had. So they've never beat. If your biggest weekend is your opening weekend, you got problems. You're not starting.
Let me
out
tell you
well.
something.
And so
When that
they're
thing
not doing
opened,
very well.
it literally took first place for. Remember that Carnival cruise that it lost power, and it was called the poo cruise because it filled up with just shit because people they couldn't do anything with it because it ran out of power. That was the poo cruise up until the point that they opened up the Ark encounter. Now that boat is full of more shit than that Carnival cruise could have ever hoped to be.
I think my favorite video of that arc is when Bill Nye visited, and I know Bill Nye isn't
that was
a
good.
biologist or anything, but man, I just watching them get destroyed.
It was like a Great Dane walking around with a little chihuahua. I mean, Ken Ham was just like, "I want you to believe, I want you to believe, believe." And
See, I
Look,
like
the
the
Ice
Ark
Age happened.
going down there.
There's a big sign that says that it did. Oh gosh.
No, Aaron has a tendency. Aaron destroys that stuff when he goes down there. He just rips them all to shreds. And
I'm sure.
he'll stand outside there and have conversations with people and just explain to them how it really is.
They're coming here next week. Answers in Genesis is coming here next Wednesday. Yep, one of the leading biologists on the ARC team will be here on Wednesday to debate Dr. Mays with replacing Darwin.
Yeah, people may not realize how rare of occurrence that actually is. This is almost unprecedented. The PhDs from Masters of Generous do not tend to go on forums where they don't have control. Matter of fact, they avoid them like the plague, and I should know because I've contacted them all. I've corresponded. You name them, I've corresponded with them at some point, pretty much, and none of them are comfortable enough to go on a forum. Now they'll correspond. Like Dr. Humphreys has been very generous. He's corresponded with me numerous times. He wrote an article to the Journal of Creation based upon what we talked about with Dr. Lachelle and Dr. Henke. But coming on, he won't do it because he won't have control, and that presents a problem because he'll be asked questions that he knows he doesn't have the answers to. First,
sign a lot of paperwork. A lot of paperwork, a lot of agreeing to this, and this. But we've been working on it since February, and it finally came together next Wednesday. So.
It's going to go really well because I mean
Congratulations.
he's a really nice guy. Dr. Jeans is a really nice guy, and so everybody's going to be polite and civil, and it's going to be academic and scholarly, and two people with PhDs on a similar subject to see who makes more sense.
Or will it?
Or you can play dumpster fire. No, we don't want a dumpster fire in this one. We want them to come back. I'd love to get like Perdome to come on, Nitrogena Perdome. Oh man, that would be amazing.
I want to dumpster Inferno.
You don't have enough of those.
No,
you can never have enough dumpster Infernos.
I guess we are at the 90-minute mark, but I guess since we're coming kind of on the arc, no pun intended, of the story, this is a good time to have a little bit of story time and kind of frighten you a little bit. I'm always looking for the next crazy thing. Like, it wasn't enough when somebody believed the earth was flat. It wasn't enough when somebody didn't believe that viruses existed or that dinosaurs didn't exist. Coming up September the 11th, that cabbage juice can cure cancer, regrow your limbs, and cure you from being gay. That's happening on September the 11th. I'm actually going to drink this juice live, and then we're going to take a bunch of dick pics and put them up on this monitor over here, and I'm going to see if I still react to them. So that will happen in real time.
That's why you had me text that.
Yeah. I'm taking all forms of submissions. So this could be a thing. September 10th could be the last day I am gay. So I'm gonna douse myself in glitter and rhinestone. But that's not enough either. As far as that sounds, that's not enough either. Yes,
salted cabbage juice. Yeah, it's salted. Very, very salted, like seawater salt.
It was on Dr. Phil about a month ago. Her name's Jilly. It's Jilly Juice. She was on Dr. Phil, and two of the ladies that were there, one of the ladies said, "I've got this headache. It's been going on for days." So she goes to the doctor. She had 2 strokes. The stuff had given her 2 strokes, and this lady still swears by this stuff. Swears by it.
It causes dehydration. It can cure cancer. It can cure autism. It can cure Down syndrome.
Yep. So, by the way, I'm not really going to drink this shit live. I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to switch it with a V8 because there's no way that I'm going to. On the off chance that it does cure gayness, I don't want to risk that.
I was going to say, you don't want to take that risk, Kyle.
No, I don't.
He's got to try it. He's got to tell us what it tastes like.
You try it, Steve.
Oh, I taste it. I'm not going to drink it, but I'll taste it.
Does it
You're not going to get a stroke from just tasting
heterosexuality as well?
Does it what?
I'm worried
cure
if Steve drinks it, will he then turn gay?
Oh, I don't know. Somebody asked me
it
a
doesn't
similar
matter.
question.
I'll be fabulous either way.
Bisexual, and I said you don't have to drink half then.
Yeah, you only drink half if you're bisexual.
But I learned recently that we all know about incels now, or up to this point, I believe we all know about incels, right? You guys know about incels?
I do.
I will agree.
Involuntarily celibate. It's short for involuntary celibate. They're guys who are pissed off because they feel that no matter what they do, no matter what they try to change, dieting, all of this stuff, they just cannot get laid, and so they stew in these online forums and their
cabbage juice.
There you go. Cures itself. Cures itself.
That could be a good link. I like where your head's at right there. That's good. But dive deeper into this group, and it is far worse than any of us thought possible. In the past 48 hours, I have learned.
Couldn't hurt, right? Giggity.
That was good. But they get it. They splinter off into subsets. So there are 3 different groups of these incels that I learned about in the past 48 hours, and Logic and Shannon are actually going to be joining us October the 2nd to talk to some members from this group. So we will have, for those of you who have been waiting for Logic, he will be joining us to kind of dive into this. But there's a group called Wrist Cells, a group called Skull Cells, and a group called Menta Cells. And Wrist Cells believe that they can't get laid due to the thickness of their wrists.
What?
Just go with it.
I'm going to let it.
Don't try to wrap your head around it.
Okay.
I know this is going to be a lot to take in. Okay. Skull Cells.
That was my reaction too, Megan.
skull cells
That's a very
believe
strange thing to focus on.
that they can't get laid because of the shape of their heads.
Okay.
Minta cells believe that
The shape of their skulls, you're saying?
right. Yeah, the actual shape
I got a
of
million
their
of them.
skull. The Minta cells escapes me for now. Anyway, there's a book, or a guide that Logic found. Logic found a PDF file that is a guide, and it lists all of these different subsets, and it's frightening. When you go through there, there's a thing called buck cells and a cock carousel, which I thought sounded actually kind of fun. I almost
It does, doesn't it?
There's brain cells too. Brain
brain
cells
cells.
study the study
Not a lot of them.
the
in
subject of
this group, but-
in cells.
Yep.
Not a lot of them. No, it's actually the study of inceldom. There's actually a complete field of inceldom. I guess you
Right.
can go now, maybe take college courses on it or something. I don't know.
Wow.
And I say this to bring up a point because we were in an after show hangout the other day after the feminism debate that we had with Holy Kool-Aid and Imraz and Nate was in there, and we were all just having a good time. And we started talking about this when we got off on this tangent. Like they're just going crazy. Like groups are splintering off, and we're making all of these different groups with labels that are just ridiculous. And how does this happen? And then Thomas Westbrook, who is aka Holy Kool-Aid, jokingly said, next thing you know, there'll be something called like we're talking about TERFs, which were transgender
Exclusionary.
Trans-exclusionary
radical
feminism. Yes.
Mhm.
So he was saying before long there'll be a furry version of that. There'll be a furry trans whatever. He said it jokingly.
Furry
and I
exclusionary
was
radical
like,
it's furry
Right.
exclusionary
Furry.
radical trans
Right. He
feminist.
said that as a joke. And something struck me like, no, that sounds too realistic to be just a joke. And I
Yeah.
Googled it. And wouldn't you fucking know, there's a FERF group. There's a furry exclusionary radical feminist group. And then there's a subsection of them. Steve, do you want to tell them what the subsection of them is?
There was a subset called furry winking exclusionary radical feminist. So FERFs have a subgroup, FERFs, FWERTs. I'm not making this up.
This is the world we live in now, ladies and gentlemen. This is the world we live in. We live in a world of wrist cells, skull cells, FERFs, FRFs, GURPs, TERPs, LERPs, MERPs, KERPs. It's ridiculous.
Okay,
No,
but this
ridiculous.
is to be fair though, this has been around for a very long time. It's just been in the Christian world, right? You have the First Baptist Church of Southern Maryland, the Second Baptist Church, then you have the First, Second Baptist Church. I mean, you could.
That's a good point.
Sub.
a
It's
good
just
point,
now
actually.
it's hitting. Now it's just hitting. Mainstream.
society.
Yeah, secular society.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean.
That's a very good point. But you never had the furry First Baptist Church. You know, there was never a furry.
There will be. There will be. No, there will be.
There
Give
will
it
be.
time.
There
Give
There
it-
probably
There is
is.
You know
there
what?
will
I
be.
gotta see if
There's
there's a furry religion. Yeah, Google it.
Google
furry
Google that,
religion.
Steve. I guarantee you there is right now.
There's furry spirituality called. Let's see here.
Stop right
Well, it's
there. I don't
called
even want to know.
Yeah, there's furry spirituality. Yeah. Under
They
Wikifur. There's a Wikifur. There's a fucking Wikifur. Oh my god.
Of course there is.
Okay.
There's a wiki to furries.
Listen, I get it if you want to be a furry, okay? If that's what you want to do, that's completely fine. But don't push the envelope where you start saying, no, I really am this animal. Like, no, I really am a wolf. I've seen that. I've seen people get on and say, I am really a wolf. I am not a human. I don't identify as a human. I am a wolf. And that's not how it works. Like, you don't get to identify as a wolf and make everybody else believe that you're a fucking wolf. That's not
How
how
do
it
you
works.
know what a wolf identifies as? I mean, I understand the gender mindset, male and female, but how the hell would you know what a wolf?
That's
I mean,
different.
that's a completely different
identifying as a man or
species.
woman is completely different. But don't come to me
Sure,
and tell
I
me
can
that I
Afraid
have
of
to
what's
talk
going
to
on in the live chat.
Huh?
They're not buying any of this. I think we're making all this shit up. They're like, there's no such thing as furry exclusionary radical
We're not-
feminists.
We're not making it up.
They're not.
Google it.
Go look it up. Yeah.
We're not at all. It's not a joke. And see, that's the problem, is that we all treat it like jokes until it's too late, and then before you know it, you're surrounded by thick-wristed, odd skull-shaped furries demanding that you you address them as a wolf.
Yeah, but you won't
That's what
be
will
surrounded
happen,
by
man.
them for long because they can't get laid. So, natural selection.
That's true, but it's not ISIS that you need to worry about, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not terrorism. It's these groups. These are the groups that will sneak up on you. Okay,
And
I don't even know why.
I guess there's another subreddit, crystal encased furry wanking exclusionary radical feminist. I don't know what the hell that means. But CEFWRF. Fuck if I know. I couldn't even venture a guess.
If
there's
there
another
were
one, shiny
aliens, I
crystal.
don't know why they haven't visited yet. They probably took one look down below and went, "No fucking way."
Nope.
I'm just looking at the Reddit. Shiny crystal encased furry wanking exclusionary radical feminist. There you go.
I can't get these 10 minutes back.
We're done.
The thing is,
Super chat.
Someone actually bought that as a domain. Like, oh yeah, do the super chat, Steve. I'm already pissed off again now.
I can't go on with this. Okay, 0132132 $5.05. I've been watching insane conspiracy theorist videos about giant trees for like 3 hours. Please bring me back to reality with this show. I've been following some of that stuff. You guys know what that is with the giant trees? With the you remember? You know what Devil's Tower is in Wyoming, right? That big plateau is really, it's a very iconic thing. Oh, you're English, that's why. In Wyoming, there's this big this really iconic structure. So it's a plateau, but it's called Devil's Tower. Well, they think that was actually one time a tree, and that humans were giants, and that was a tree that got chopped down. And they also believe that like the beaches, the sand on the beach, isn't sand; it's wood chips.
Okay,
What?
I'll take that. I will take people that believe that. That to me sounds normal compared to what we just went through. The giants, yes.
You need to
Believe in
reevaluate your understanding of normal, Kyle.
Yeah, our whole thing from normal shifted like way over here.
When people
Yeah, I bet it has.
bring Bigfoot
normative
back.
is relative now.
Those were normal. I can take those again. Bring Bigfoot back. Make Bigfoot great again. Okay? Stop it with this all the time.
And they also have, not only that, they have these people that go around and they film mountains and they say, hey, look, here's one of the atlases that was turned to stone, and this is where they now reside. This is their tomb. This is their encapsulation. Yeah, it's a big thing. Okay. Jamie Sislo, $20. No pun intended. To remind Digital Hammurabi that, modesty aside, it is perfectly fine to say you are an expert on this stuff. Also, shout out to the new upcoming show, Rolling Preview Window. All right, so they noticed. One person noticed the rolling preview window. That's good, thank you. But yeah, I agree with Jamie. I mean, it's good. It's good to be humble and stuff, but you're an expert in a certain field. Say you're an expert in this field. There's no reason to shy away from that. And both of you are definitely experts in seriology and many other things. Well, yeah, she's just an expert. You're just here for
Steve and I are
just here for Kyle's eye candy.
Steve and I are experts in herbology.
Mm-hmm. Certified. Prophet of Cthulhu, $5. Did the Epic of Gilgamesh share a god pantheon with the Enuma Elish? Is that how you pronounce it? Enuma Elish.
Yes.
Elish.
Yep.
Okay.
Enuma Elish. Yeah, it means when on high.
Gotcha.
It's the first two.
And one more.
Sorry.
That was an actual pantheon then?
There is no one single Mesopotamian pantheon.
Yeah.
It kind of varies depending on what city you were from, like what order the gods were in and who was related to who. Yes, generally speaking, they're the same gods in the Enuma Elish as in Gilgamesh.
The book that I'm going through now in the daily data, this book by Elio Oppenheim, he has a chapter, and it's a little extreme, but it's entitled "Why a Mesopotamian Religion Should Not Be Written." And again, I think he probably wrote it.
It's a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, but saying that the pantheon, like what is Sumerian religion? It's you're talking about 3,000 years of recorded religion, and so and in different places in Mesopotamia, so there's not this homogeneity. I think that to the extent that maybe we would like, but yes,
Generally speaking, they're the same
Same
gods in
gods.
both literature.
Can you hold that book
And
up
actually,
one more time to the camera, Dr. Bowen? If this is the one that I'm thinking, I don't think it is. But what is the there's one like wall carving that looks similar to that, where this guy's fighting this thing that looks like a it's got like a tiger-looking head, and it's like three
that was
different.
Tiamat, wasn't it? Was it Tiamat? Was it supposed to be?
Well, that one is a
there?
cylinder seal.
Okay.
But I know the
what's
I know
that-
the
what's that
leaf
animal
you're
right there
talking
that's-
about. That guy right there.
Yeah. What is that?
I would guess it's a demon. If it had bird wings, I'd say it was probably the Anzu bird, but that's
Near Eastern art is a field all itself.
Gotcha.
Well, we're actually going to have
eventually.
eventually an art historian come on the show. We have to start doing more live things.
But no, it's quite common in iconography to have a human body and an animal head. Those creatures don't always have like specific identities. Sometimes they're just protective spirits or demons, any host of a number of things. If you see something with an eagle body and the wings and then a lion's head, it's probably the Anzu bird, which turns up in a lot of mythology.
We can come on and summarize that sometime. That is a badass story.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and there's the bull guy. He's depicted a lot too. That the face of a human on a bull's body.
There's a lot of
Wings.
animus and
That
animal
turns up,
stories. Yeah.
That's cool.
And by the way, Jim makes a good point. I forgot to mention this about the tree thing. With the giants, they actually think that craters, like asteroids that hit the Earth, those types of craters, they think that those were actually just giants that had uprooted trees, and those craters are what's left behind. They have a weird narrative because they obviously there's no such thing as space, right? So
That's
permanent.
funny.
They can't be space. They can't have asteroids.
That's what Noah, like the Russell Crowe version of Noah.
I never saw it.
It came out a couple years ago, but in that version of the movie, they had these like rock people. They were giants, but made of rock, and these were the things that God sent down to clear the forest. Like Noah didn't cut down the trees and all that by himself. These deformed rock-looking people would like go through the forest and club it down and haul it up and all that stuff. So I'm not sure
you're
where
thinking of the never-ending story, Kyle.
No, I'm thinking of it's Noah. It was bizarre. Because you're not expecting that.
Strong.
I was listening at the time when I went and saw
See,
it. And I
there's
was like, this is blasphemous.
Well, there's a similar story on the Popol Vuh, which is a more was a Mayan codex. But in the Popol Vuh, there's people, but they're made of wood, not stone. But
These were
there's- I mean, so yeah.
Like Transformers.
But there's a flood narrative of that region too. The Mayans had this flood narrative that these two brothers were having war, and there's a great deluge, and very similar narrative there. But one more super chat. Prophet of Cthulhu, $5. Which artifacts were lost when ISIS was destroying statues with Sledgehammer 3 years ago? And not to bring up, sadness here, and we don't want you to get emotionally disturbed. What was the things that were mostly lost?
Oh, the whole city of Palmyra. Well, that was blown up.
An entire
I think.
culture?
A lot of it.
An entire culture?
Well, no, the city of Palmyra. They kind of went through there with bulldozers, I think, or explosives of some kind. So that's mostly gone. A lot of the videos that were put out were Neo-Assyrian 🀭, which are those big ball-headed, like four-legged figures with the giant wings that were used to protect. Sorry, cat.
For real?
Yeah, didn't they destroy 🀭?
Oh, no, I was saying for real.
Oh,
that
sorry, the cat
jumping
just
up.
jumped up and was about to sit on the laptop.
He was about to die.
He was about to die. So the 🀭 was the thing that a lot of the videos were of. I don't know that there's been an inventory taken of what has been destroyed in detail, because I'm not sure that we have access to that information. A lot has been lost, and this actually leads back into the question of looting and the black market for Mesopotamian antiquities, because a lot of terror organizations seem to get their funding from selling antiquities on the black market, like these tablets, because they know people will pay money for them and probably won't ask too many questions about where they came from.
What are they doing
much
more
is
to
one of those
secure
tab-
some of these things?
Like, are they expensive?
And yeah,
Well, like
what's
when
the cost of them?
Yeah, I mean, I know that I excavated with a team from Hopkins in Syria in 2010, and at a small site to the east, about an hour and a half east of Aleppo. And there was a village. There's a village right on the tell, right on it, but just beside the tell. And there was a guard that was hired from the village that sits there year round, and he was paid by the excavation team to guard the site. That's what he does.
But that's an exception. A lot of the times, archaeologists don't know about sites, and if local people find them first, then that kind of thing happens. And also, you have the problem, especially with Syria and the civil war. Once that kind of thing starts happening, really the concern for antiquities and archaeological research quite rightly goes out the window, because people are scared for their lives.
Yeah.
How much? And to answer the question about costs, I actually don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got it.
Let's see what they went on eBay.
I was getting ready to say that same thing.
Stuff turns up on eBay. Like, you can find stuff on eBay.
Don't.
No, please, for the love of God, don't.
I mean,
How would you?
do you think it's more? What'd you say, Kyle? You're breaking up. You broke up.
I was saying, how would you know, like, if you were going to buy one, which would be an authentic tablet and which, would be a counterfeit?
Yeah, you might not.
Yeah, and it's not always a case of counterfeit. It's more often a case of, was this excavated legally? Is there some kind of documentation of authenticity? Is this left the country of origin legally, or has it been smuggled out in someone's suitcase hidden under their socks?
What do you think is more of a moral, ethical issue? The person selling a tablet or the person buying it?
It's a great question.
I tend to ask a few every so often.
Both.
Yeah.
And it's one of the frustrating things, I think. We had an issue recently with some people that were going up to visit the Museum of the Bible. And, of course, they didn't think anything about this. But, going and spending the money to support that organization that's doing this immoral thing. It's a Christian group that's doing this immoral thing. It's just, well, we couldn't stay quiet about it. So,
and there's also links in with that is these looted objects, especially if they're tablets and they have writing on them, become immensely more valuable once there's a translation made of them.
Yes.
When you know what something says, people will pay more for it. So there's quite a big controversial debate in our field as to whether professional scholars should even translate this stuff. On the one hand, you want to translate whatever you can because it adds to our collective knowledge of the culture and the civilizations that we find so fascinating, and then inform our opinion of the current world. But on the other hand, once you translate it, it's more valuable and you're effectively encouraging looting.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for that at all. It's very difficult.
We interviewed,
Well, one last question again.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry.
Just one last. We have one last question on the table, but go ahead and finish what you were saying.
We did an interview a couple of months ago with a PhD in archaeology who actually is also a journalist who specializes in the study of looted antiquities.
Digital Hammurabi. Go check it out. Like and subscribe.
Like and
I believe that's taken.
subscribe. Yeah, that's already been used. Can't get that one. You need something else.
You should be let's see. We'll think of something to do with
Oh no,
Well,
we
you know
have
what?
a
Say it in Sumerian.
tagline.
How about this? Say it in Sumerian.
Yeah. No, we have our tagline. We came up with it last week. It's
It was good.
at the end of every video we say, until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?
very good.
Oh,
I like it.
you're
Which is
presupping.
weirdly
You're
also what we
presupping
tell
then.
our 11-year-old.
Yeah, our Patreon. When you join our Patreon, you join HAPS. Humans Against Poor Scholarship. So
That's very clever. I like that. We still are looking for our sign-off line.
We're never going to have one. But isn't that Sci-10's pre-sup tagline? How do you know that?
Oh, is it? I
ours
didn't know that.
is
Yeah.
better because his doesn't
I
mean
like his
anything.
more.
He's being
No, it really
facetious.
doesn't. It's well,
His
he does
means
use that
I
question
have
a
an
lot. but,
argument, so
right.
I will ask you
Exactly.
how you know that because I don't have anything to say back.
So the last question on the table that's important. Inquiring minds do want to know this. Kyle, have you fixed your chair?
Well, you tell me, guys. Does it seem like I fixed my chair? Am I back to my
No.
normal?
No.
Huh?
No. It
I
seems
am.
like you're a little bit low still.
No.
Really? It seems like
I'm
you're a little
back
bit
to
low
normal.
to me. I don't know.
I was just like, whenever I
Oh,
get
you're leaning back. That's
enthralled
why.
listening to, I hunch over like this. But that's just
Yeah,
me
you're
being
hunching or
enthralled
leaning back.
in what I'm doing. I did get a new chair, and my new chair allows me to recline and rock when I want to. See, if I was still on the floor, I wouldn't be able to do this right here.
Well, there you go, people. Now you know.
Now you know. Okay. Yes. So now it is time for you guys to let everybody know what you've got coming up, where they can find you, social media, Twitter, all of that good stuff.
Okay.
Sell yourself.
Our Twitter is @digi_Hammurabi. It's mostly me, but if you send us questions that Josh needs to answer, I will see that he gets them. Yeah, I can usually be found arguing with people who think that the Bible is historical fact, and retweeting interesting things about cuneiform because I am first and foremost a cuneiform geek.
We have our weekly Soothing Stories with Megan, where she reads in her amazing British accent a Sumerian or an Akkadian literary text. And they're actually really, really awesome. And of course, Monday through Friday, I do the daily data. So right now we're going through, we just did a whole series on biblical textual criticism. So
if you've ever wondered how the Bible came to be in its current form, go watch the videos and then you will know everything.
how did all the errors creep in and how did things change? Who copied it? It's all in there. And now we're going through basically an introduction to Mesopotamia, the history, the culture, in a really easy to digest format. I teach once a month. I put out a Sumerian grammar video, and 2 weeks after I put it out on Saturday at noon, we do a Google Hangout, which is basically a class where we go over it together, and all of it's free. Obviously, just email us at digitalhammurabi@gmail.com to get the link. There you go.
Are you gonna do? Are you gonna go in course with like history, and when you get to the where, I guess Babylon turns into Assyria, are you gonna become digital Assyriology at that point?
Probably not.
No, it's hard to change branding like that, I think.
Good call. And one last thing, tell them about your the special that you did about homosexuality in the Bible.
Yes. So there was a paper that came out couple of months ago by Dr. Idan Dershowitz, who's Harvard grad, Harvard postdoc.
Postdoc.
Yeah, he's a Harvard postdoc. So,
The
studied.
guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, studied at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And he knows what he's talking about. And he wrote a paper on Leviticus 18, which is one of the big passages that talks about homosexuality in the Bible. And everybody goes back to it. It says, "You shall not lie with a male as you do with a female. It's an abomination." Right? Well, he argues that originally Leviticus 18 not only did not condemn homosexuality, but condoned it, and did so. Well, you can watch the video, but basically, originally the passage just had, "Don't sleep with people in your family," right? Don't sleep with your mom, don't sleep with your sister, don't sleep with your aunt, and it said, "Don't sleep with your father, and don't sleep with your uncle." And by implication, when it says "don't sleep with your sister," what that means is you can sleep with other women, just not your sister. So when it says you can sleep with your uncle, you can sleep with other men, but just not with your uncle, right? A later redactor, a later editor came back during the Persian period, he argues, which I think is pretty sound. And at that point, because see, in the ancient Near East, homosexuality was cool. It was absolutely fine, right? In fact, there are Omen texts, Akkadian Omen texts that say if you have sex with your male colleague, if a man has sex with his male colleague, he will have great success, right? So I mean, it's a good thing. So it fit into
right
the
now.
wider.
Exactly.
Yeah, you are, Kyle. And so it was very much in keeping with the wider ancient Near East. Well, during that later period, when this scribe came back to Leviticus 18, he said, "Oh my gosh, this implicitly allows for homosexuality. We have to do something about that." Well, they couldn't delete the text, right? So what they did instead was add things to it. So they added at the end of the sentence where it says, "Do not have sex with your uncle," it added, "that is to say, his wife." When it says, "Don't have sex with your mother and your father," it added, "she is your mother. Don't have sex with her," right? In other words, completely taking out the male part, and it only does it on the two verses that talk about sleeping with your male relative. So I did a video about it, summarizing it. We contacted Dr. Dershowitz to ask if we could summarize it. We wanted to get him on, but
the article got picked up by the New York Times, and from the sounds of things, he was inundated and said he wouldn't be doing any interviews, but that we were very welcome to do a video on his article instead.
So if you go to Digital Hammurabi, it's called
Homosexuality in the Bible.
Homosexuality in the Bible, something like that.
You can't miss it. It's got a giant rainbow flag.
It's really good.
Yeah, but
It's really good. And to your point about homosexuality being a thing back then, there's an old saying, and I guess we can leave America and the rest of the world with this little nugget. But they used to say that the Greeks invented sex, and the Romans invented it with women.
It's about right.
Steve, any last words before we close out and take a night?
I'm just wondering what would happen if all these theists that were out there that have this narrative that homosexuality is wrong, if they actually did discover what you said was actually the case, and they had learned these things were added on later on, and the early ones, you know what, homosexuality was fine. How would they think differently? I mean, what would happen in their minds? Would they change their position? Would they realize how wrong they would? Would they be apologetic? Would they spend the rest of their life trying to make amends for the harm that they've done in society? I'm curious. I'm just really kind of curious. I doubt it. You know, they really don't. No, they really don't. Matter of fact, I'll leave you with one of the tweets I just had that's getting a lot of likes right now. I basically said, that prayers for the children that were molested failed. Prayers for, ending world hunger failed. Prayers for all these different things have failed. But yet, people still, I'll read it off to you. It said, prayers to stop school shootings failed. Prayer to stop church molestations failed. Prayers to end world hunger failed. Prayers to stop natural disasters, failed. Prayers to find lost car keys, maybe once or twice. God really needs to get his freaking priorities straight. And so that's kind of the thing that I leave you guys with. That you look at, it's all fine and dandy to try to hope and best, pray and hope for the best. But you know what? It doesn't do shit when people don't take action. And these things like school shootings are real things. These things like child molestations are real things. Prayer's not going to solve it. Hate to tell you. So
yeah,
that's
now
that's
they're
my
shooting up
rant for
gaming
today.
centers. The game shooting from this past weekend, the John Madden tournament. I mean, you can't do anything
Yep.
nowadays without worrying about that. It's ridiculous.
It was an
And,
electronic arts thing, for Pete's sake.
Because
I mean,
the people that he went after beat him in the game. Like that was his motivation. They beat him in a fucking game. I mean, this is what you get when you have groups like We Name Dog. But I have to tell you, Steve, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you back here tomorrow at 8 p.m. for Saitin and Raul from Street Knowledge. But instead of red herring, Steve, I came very close to our little rant segment being called Look It.
Yeah, a good title.
I gave it serious.
Well, mine was a
serious
Look It
thought.
segment. So
Yeah. We'll see you tomorrow. Steve will be bringing the red herring tomorrow. So we'll see you then. Thank you to Digital Hammurabi. And we love you
Thank
guys.
you.
Oh,
Welcome
thank
back.
you guys for having us.
Go
thank you, guys.
subscribe.
Non-Sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.